And we're live. Peter Duke here from the Pacific's Palisades, California, and George Webb, you are in bocage country.
Yes, bocage. I think bocage means like hedgerows.
Well,
I don't know.
yes, that's English for bocage. Yes, hedgerow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually right where I'm learning a lot. I thought I knew everything there was to know about D-Day, but I didn't know squat. I mean, I'm really learning a lot from the reenactors and been here for 3 days and three different locations where they're famous and meeting active generals, so that's pretty cool, and active military folks. But the big story here is, hey, did you realize that this is the first D-Day we've ever celebrated, that we've sent money openly to Nazis like Klaus Schwab, because his father was the top contractor for Hitler, and neo-Nazis like Kolomoisky in Ukraine. So, so that's why I'm here, but I'm learning an awful lot about the war. Um,
So, what's
and it's been,
something that you learned that you didn't know before?
well, I knew that there was a problem breaking out. I'm not far from the coast here. I'm 20 miles probably near St. Lo. So you'll see this in the movie Saving Private Ryan. I didn't realize that they didn't take St. Lo until 6 weeks later.
Right. They surrounded it and just moved on.
Yeah, but the Germans counterattacked on August the 8th. So to full month, 2 months later, they weren't much farther than we are right now.
Right.
And it was the problem of these hedgerows, which are built up areas in between these old borders between farms, that became killing fields, because as soon as you popped your head out of the hedgerow, just like if your neighbor kind of came through your hedges, they're easy targets.
Yeah,
And
I have a story about that. I used to play these, Rand inspired military simulation games, and my there was an extra bedroom in my parents' house. We had four bedrooms upstairs, and my sister moved out of one bedroom and into the other. And when she did, there was a game that my brother and I had. We had all these little cardboard pieces, and each one represented a tank or an infantry unit or something like that. And we built an entire hedgerow complex on the wall of my sister's room with masking tape. We just like each hedgerow was like a line of masking tape. My mother came in one day and she said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It was pretty crazy. But yeah, hedgerows are so the farms in that part of France, they would build up either walls, stone walls, or lines of trees, and in a lot of cases, both. And they made these really kind of significant borders around the fields. So basically, you had a field with a wall of stone and trees around it, and there's a patchwork of them. I mean, there's thousands of them, and what wound up and the roads that ran between the hedgerows back then were barely wider than a wagon, a horse drawn wagon. And so the issue was that the Germans would get their anti-tank guns set up, behind a row of trees, and in order for the Allies to advance, they would have to break out through the hedgerows, which were, I mean, you couldn't just drive a tank through it the way that you normally could. And they had to, I think that they called them funnies. They came up with these basically these tanks that had these giant kind of like uh, uh, teeth on the front of them that they used for punching through the hedgerows. But of course, as soon as they punched through the hedgerows, then the Germans knew where they were coming from, and they could turn their anti-tank guns around. So yeah, it was not good.
it was not good. And I was at the Hedgerow Museum today, and I think it's Caratan. I think its name is a new museum, and I met the owner, and he was gracious enough to. There was a paratrooper thing going on, 101st Airborne, so that was good, and went through his new museum, and it was it was bad news here for 2 months. It was really worse than the D-Day landing for most of it, except Omaha Beach. Utah Beach, relatively low resistance. Sword Beach, Juneau. Well, Juneau with the Canadians, there was a lot of resistance, but Sword and Gold Beach, not a lot. And then, of course, everybody knows Tom Hanks with Saving Private Ryan in Omaha Beach was nasty, nasty, nasty. But those hedgerows, I mean, that was 2 months, an additional Omaha Beach. And it was probably more like a lot of the people that were telling the stories didn't really realize that the German machine guns could shoot 1,000 rounds a minute. So they were surprised with Omaha Beach. But once you know that, then your commanding officer says, "Okay, you're going to go through that hedgerow, soldier." You're like, "Wait a minute, I've been through this before." So there's a lot of sacrifice here. That's all I'm trying to get to. And do we really want to throw it all away on Ukrainian billionaire who is, God knows what he's using the money for, all these billions going to Ukraine? I think there's a lot of programs that we don't know about that they're hiding through Kolomoisky. And then Klaus Schwab. All of our U.S. senators, Peter, going into Switzerland and going to visit Klaus Schwab.
Right. Well, yeah. When you start dealing with that kind of money, it's like it's easy to create a cover story. It's like he's got 7 houses and he's got 12 cars and he's got a G6 and he's got all of these other things. But even if you add up the total on all of those, it's like 1%, right? So like, what's he actually really spending the money on? It's kind of clearly like a cutout money laundering scenario.
I mean, even his puppet, which is Zelensky, everybody knows Zelensky's Kolomoisky's puppet. Even Zelensky's a billionaire. So if the puppet is a billionaire, this is like, what's Geppetto making in this deal? It's like, or wait, I think that's Pinocchio. Well, I think Pinocchio's a puppet. Anyway,
Well, Tom Hanks is Geppetto, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
the new movie is coming out. Tom Hanks is Geppetto. The blue fairy is black.
Yeah,
She's black and blue.
Well, you just wonder. I mean, did everybody forget the movie? I mean, I understand that there was a couple veterans that were still alive, and I understand that they're very old now, 100 years old. But did everybody forget the movie with Tom Hanks? Did everybody forget The Longest Day? Maybe The Longest Day was a long time ago, but it just doesn't seem. Maybe it's 20 years now that Saving Private Ryan was out, but. Remember that whole thing about democracy and liberation and uh,
And
well,
honoring the greatest generation and blah blah blah.
yeah, that was Tom Brokaw, member of the Greatest Generation, and this against Nazism, that we'd never have Nazism. I don't know. It just seems like,
But
um,
but I learned all about this from you and John O'Loughlin. I mean, the Nazis, and I think it's Dr. Farrell who says you don't have to be afraid of the Nazis in Berlin anymore. It's the ones in D.C. that are the problem. You know. So
well, there's a good point there.
yeah.
The, now, the distinction I draw is just the first openly funding. I agree with you. Covert funding since the '60s. I wrote a Substack piece and I started my new book, Blood, Sand, and Betrayal. And the first conspiracy theorist I've dubbed in my book is Dwight David Eisenhower, because he started out saying, I believe in America at Omaha Beach. He was running the whole thing. And then when after 2 presidencies, he became a conspiracy theorist, and then he believed in something called the military industrial complex. So that's my first conspiracy theorist. This is even before the word conspiracy theorist was really coined. The second conspiracy theorist in the world is John F. Kennedy, because he thought that
With his secret society speech, right? Or secret,
his
yeah.
secret society speech at American University. So he's the second conspiracy theorist. And there's probably been others, but the third president I'll throw in there is Richard Nixon, because he says, "Hey, wait a minute, Henry Kissinger wants to develop these bioweapons, and I don't want to do bioweapons, and I'm going to sign the bioweapons convention." And then Kissinger immediately turns around and then starts farming it out to Holland and farming it out to NATO. So yeah, so what I try to do is say conspiracy theories. These conspiracy theorists, these first two, Kennedy and Eisenhower, actually were proven right because we were actually funding these Nazis all along. And there's Annie Jacobson's book, and then Jim Mars has the Fourth Reich book. All these guys actually were correct because we've been proving that now. There's another guy who wrote a book a couple of years ago named George Webb, who talked about Klaus Schwab and his father being into
turbines,
secret underground reactors and flamethrowers and everything else you can think of. And we just gave $40 billion to these criminals. So I said, hey, these are like eggs. These conspiracy theories just are not hatched yet. We just don't. The egg is not a chicken. Okay, the egg is not a chicken, but an egg is an awfully good predictor of a chicken. And so
this is a George. Is this original, George? Did you make this up?
Yeah, it's original.
Because this is a fantastic metaphor.
Yeah,
an egg is not a chicken, but it predicts a chicken.
Yeah, it's a darn good predictor. So what I said was, conspiracy theorists are like chickens. They lay eggs, and everybody says it's not a chicken until it turns into a chick and grows up into a chicken. So there's always going to be a period of incubation where the MSM media is correct, because they're going to point at the eggs and they're going to go, "That's not a chicken." And I'm going to add the word "yet." It's not a chicken yet. And that's the way these things are. And that's the first installment of Blood, Sand, and Betrayal. And we'll have another one here pretty quickly.
Well, very good. I was watching a video the other day because I'm fascinated by this movie F for Fake, which was Orson Welles' last film, and my producer Carrie, my wife, came up with a question the other day, which is this is like a Dave Underdown question. It's like, is Orson Welles related to H.G. Wells? Good, it's a good question. Anyway, I was fascinated by this movie F for Fake, and I found a little 4.5 minute video. I'll see if I can find it, where the guy explains the genius of Orson Welles and how he learned everything that he knew about cutting videos from this movie. And he shows a clip from Trey. I can't remember Trey. Is it Trey Parker? From Matt and Trey, the guys who do South Park, and he's explaining how every great video, every scene is either something happens, and then they're in between every scene, in good storytelling in good video storytelling is either a but or a therefore. Okay, so this happened, but then this happened, therefore this happened, but, so it goes back and forth from but to therefore, from but to therefore. So something new that I learned the other day. I just thought I'd share it with you, George.
These are the gems that people pay, their, family fortunes to go to film school to learn at UCLA Film School. And here, Peter Duke is just throwing them out like pearls at a, parade, like a fireman throwing out candy. So I'm trying to think of an example of that. The Orson Welles and the H.G. Wells parallel is interesting because didn't H.G. Wells do The Time Machine?
Well, H.G. Wells, he did The Time Machine that had Morlocks and Eloy, and it seems like that's what Klaus and his friends are trying to do. They're trying to separate us into the Morlocks and the Eloy. He did The Invisible Man. If you read The Invisible Man, it's a a story about a community that is terrorized by something they can't see. He did The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is about the development of genetic chimeras. Uh, he did War of the Worlds, where human beings are literally cowed. They're like dealt with like cattle by the Martians, and the only thing that stops the Martians is a microbe that winds up mysteriously killing the Martians. So all of these themes that Wells was writing about in the late 1890s are things that we're living with right now. He also happened to write the book The New World Order and a not so secret conspiracy. I can't remember what was the conspiracy book that he wrote. Yeah, but he was kind of like the literary godfather of a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and of course Orson Welles went and did the radio play of War of the Worlds, which is the H.G. Wells book. So there was a lot of connection, I think. Um,
And
you know,
that was much later than I thought. I see that it was 1938 when he did that? I'm trying to remember. I thought it was the 1920s, and I went and I did some research, and I think that it was actually 38. And Wells did a lot. You know, Wells got an exemption from military service, World War II, but then he wound up doing a bunch of films for the military. And then he did that weird film that you and I talked about before, which is, what was that one? Where he played a Nazi who was hiding.
yeah, and
Uh,
I'm trying to
was it
remember
that
the.
movie? What? No, the Orson Welles film. Anyway,
That wasn't F for Fake. Wasn't the one about the Nazi
no,
living?
F for Fake is about okay, again, and it's funny because you're one of the only people that and this audience is really the only audience that I can discuss this with. Okay, so F for Fake. Here's the story Orson Welles tells. Now, again, I think that Orson Welles is kind of like the hero of my play because he pushes what? The Stranger is the name of the movie,
The Stranger. Yeah.
which is available on YouTube for free. Um, Orson Welles is the hero of my play because he pushes back against the New World Order, who are trying to kind of take over media, and winds up having his career ruined because of it. But in F for Fake, the way Orson Welles tells the story is that he had a friend who was a film director in France, who's the world's actually an island, maybe a Sardinia or Majorca or one of those little islands, and he was the world's greatest forger, and so his friend was a French filmmaker who was making a movie about this forger, but the way that Wells tells the story, his friend kind of like needed finishing money or something. Like he had shot the film, but he needed money to finish the film. And so Wells looked at the footage that he had and agreed that he would buy the footage because it turned out that there was an author who was doing a biography on the world's greatest forger. And that Wells wanted to interview him too. So Wells bought the footage and then started interviewing the director who was shooting the film and started interviewing the writer. The writer happened to be a guy named Clifford Irving. Clifford Irving famously wrote the autobiography of
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. And then as they were getting ready to release that movie and Wells was going around shopping and around trying to get distribution for it, the Howard Hughes scandal broke. So then he had another story. So then he pulled the film back and he started recutting it and putting other people, interviewing other people, because it basically it's like the Russian doll, right? You've got the forger in the middle, then you've got the forger doing a forgery about you got the forger doing a biography about the forger, because Clifford Irving is a forger, right? And then outside of that, then you have Orson Welles making this film about a forger writing a book about a forger who's in a movie. So it's like a Russian doll thing. And but what's interesting to me, Robert Mayhew was Howard Hughes' handler at that point in time, right? And I wonder whether or not part of the purpose of this movie was just kind of like a cover story, Because wasn't the CIA really into modern art? And weren't there a lot of paintings that were kind of being trafficked around after World War II because the Nazis had stolen a bunch of art and then they were trying to repatriate a lot of that stuff. And there was a lot of art that was flowing into dealers, and people were kind of unsure what to do with it, and it kind of created a black market of art. And I'm just wondering whether or not, like, the whole thing is in a weird way, it's a different kind of fake, and that is that it's really just a, kind of a cover story for the fact that Mayhew hired Clifford Irving, and that this forger actually really was working for some intelligence agencies or something like that. I don't know the answer to any of those questions, but
I
it's
would
really,
check
yeah.
if this was a test. I would check all the above. And let me prove how right you are, because Bob Mayhew, I think, was the original forger for all the Nazis coming to the United States, especially places like where you lived in Redondo Beach, and places like well, you didn't live in Redondo Beach, but
I can see
company,
Redondo Beach from the bluffs in front of my house.
yeah,
Yeah.
where they were working on Rockwell International type um, rockets, the Nazi rocket guys, and aviation was the way to get in before really the rocket business got going. And Hughes Aircraft was one of the great ways to get the Nazis in there. And of course, they love oil, so they have a little strip that LA has going down to Los Angeles to the oil deposits in Los Angeles to the La Brea tar pits. There's a little strip of Los Angeles where the pipeline is between those two. So I had some fun doing that story. But I think you're right. It is sort of a way of like winking, like, hey, I got away with all this. I got all these guys in here and you didn't see it. I got all the guys over at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is now Space Command. Uh,
Which when they shoot SpaceX rockets at the at the right time, you can see them from right in front of my house. You can see them take off.
yeah, that's how close you are. And then if you look at where they filmed Top Gun, and Tom Cruise has a new movie out, which is supposed to be pretty good.
I saw it.
Yeah,
We could talk about it after you finish. You could,
but
I don't.
Miramar, if you go by there, there's where the guy who was, um, on the back of my BlackBerry 327360, it was the Carmen line. It's von Carmen, and Hap Arnold was Hapless Arnold, who was the guy running the advanced weapons programs for space and for Air Force, and everything he did was basically given to him by von Karman. And there's winks all over Southern California in aviation and space to the Nazis, to the point where I even saw Steve Carroll did a takeoff on the Space Force. I call it, I don't know, the Space Academy or something like that, where the chimps, turn in through a genetic experiment, turn out to be smarter than the Nazi space scientists. But they even make jokes about how it was all Nazis out at Lompoc. So, and then we have the Steve Hodel Black Widow mystery that starts there, a Howard Hughes Oconus lure. And I think Mayhew just uses this Black Widow all over Los Angeles to, just uh, basically compromise everybody in the Hollywood.
It's interesting you mentioned Hap Arnold because when I one of my you've seen my computer, my desktop, the photos on my desktop are like Jimmy Doolittle taking off from the Hornet, getting ready to go bomb Tokyo, and I did a bunch of research on Jimmy Doolittle at one point, and it's so interesting because I think he was a civilian when the war started, and he got a phone call from Hap Arnold, and Hap Arnold wanted Jimmy Doolittle he was the first person who ever graduated from MIT with a degree in aeronautical engineering. So he was a world famous air racer. He used to in the 1930s. He used to fly planes as fast as any human being, and he got a degree in aeronautical engineering from MIT. First person ever did, and or Caltech, maybe I think MIT. but people can fact check me. Anyway, Hap Arno called him up and said, "I want you to help uh, uh, the big companies like GM and Ford figure out how to make airplanes because they didn't know how because they made cars, and in order to help him, they made him a captain or a colonel or I think they made him a colonel, and they gave him a P-40. He had his own private P-40 that he used to fly from wherever he was going to wherever he was going. So I was thinking, just if you think about it, like it's 1941, and you've just been hired by the Air Force, and they give you your own fighter as your personal vehicle.
Absolutely. And another guy named Lindbergh had a similar role in World War II factories and so forth, and getting the war machine pumped up. And it's hard not to see these guys as figureheads behind a whole bunch of other engineers, because
Sure,
there's so
sure,
much.
sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of Doolittle, but I think the wink inside of hey, I have all this footage I've shot, but I can't finish it because I'm a forger, and I'll go to jail if I put my name on this,
Right.
because every name I've ever done is somebody else's name. So would you finish this for me? I mean, I think that was Orson Welles's role, is kind of like when you distance something so you have plausible deniability. Well,
Right.
we'll just have Wells finish this thing. That'll give us deniability. So,
Exactly. Exactly. I think.
but as far as the paintings go, I just was in the free port of Geneva. I hope I'm not. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah. I'm
The
just
free port.
while you're talking, I'm just rolling a video I shot of SpaceX taking off from Vandenberg from my
Oh wow,
house. So
very cool.
and it'll loop here. So keep talking.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
was just going to say I was just in Geneva for a week and a half, and running down all of Kolomoisky's multi-million-dollar houses, and you know, and his wife's million-dollar houses. A gal named Chair Talk, not Chair Toff, but Chair Talk. And it's a common thing, by the way, when Russians come to America, that they change their name from like Ken Alabekov, who was running the Russian bioweapons program, to Alabek. For some reason, the double F goes to a K, but this is Chair Talk. And then the Gregoire,
Or Dukalski to Duke.
or Dukalski to Duke. Yeah. And, but this guy is related to this top Rothschild banker named Gregoire Chertok. So it's just like, oh no, now I'm up against the Rothschilds directly, and it's not conspiracy theory. But anyway, there's supposedly, I'm not saying it's the Rothschilds, but supposedly agents in the mountains there, the French Alps in Switzerland, in the free port of Geneva, have all these paintings, and there's all these climate controlled warehouses and so forth for specifically artwork. And if you think about Hitler's art and Mussolini's art and all the countries they took over and how many houses they would have ransacked, what do you do with all that stuff? It's hot, so you have to kind of say, well, if you run my illegal airplane company at Rockwell International or wherever, I'll give you some artwork. And we have one Heinrich Müller, who ran the SS, who literally used to play the piano for one Harry Truman. Maybe he was even the first conspiracy theorist before Dwight Eisenhower, because he felt the CIA was a Gestapo. He called the CIA, or early CIA, Gestapo. So maybe he was the first conspiracy theorist, but Heinrich Müller would play the piano, and they would bring over a priceless piece of art, and then they would forget to take it with them. So the playing of the piano was kind of like, we need to put in a little bit of time here so it doesn't look like we just dropped off a priceless piece of art. but here you go. And Heinrich Mueller played this piano game, I think, with U.S. senators and various people in the U.S. State Department. And it becomes your kind of coin of the realm. If you have no money and all you have is gold bars and artwork, well, there you go.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's all, I mean, this stuff is, when you talk about non-fungible original pieces of art that have some kind of intrinsic value are ultimately non-fungible. And if you had all of that stuff, would you really want to give it back if you had a really good forger? Like if you had a forger who was so good that you normally want to put him in jail, but what you do is you put him to work for you because you have all of this stuff in storage, right? And you want to give it back. Except that a lot of the people who you stole it from are dead, so they wouldn't really know the difference if they got the right one back or not. You
Well, this
know,
happened. This happened with the head of the Luftwaffe, Goering. Goering had a huge art collection from all the stolen art that he had, and they did hire. I'm not saying it's the Rothschilds in the Freeport of Geneva, but it's going to be the Rothschilds in the Freeport of Geneva. I'm just letting everybody know. But I said that subaudibly, so you didn't hear that because everybody will say it's conspiracy theory. But in
it's an
Operation,
egg. It's an egg.
yes, yes, that's a
It's an egg.
subaudible. Yeah,
No,
that
but I
was.
mean, it's an egg. One day it will hatch and it will
Oh yeah,
be,
yeah.
yeah.
It's an egg. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, it's an egg. But that's exactly what happened, and it was called Operation Dustbin. And he was in a prison in Luxembourg when they were awaiting trial. Remember, the Nazi doctors are at a separate show trial that nobody ends up going to jail for all the
I
IG.
think one guy hung.
Yeah, yeah.
But
They always throw one guy.
Kirk Bloma had his conviction reversed and thrown out, and
So
then
did Eric Traub. You
yeah,
know, all the Nazi doctors. But then they were going to hang. The patsy was going to be Goering. He was garish, and they were going to make him the sacrificial lamb at the Nuremberg trial. And they let him know right before he died. Oh, by the way, you know that priceless art collection? That's all forgeries. We replaced all that with forgeries. And a lot of the Nazi high command, I think, fell for this. And the Muellers of the world, this is where the spitting image of this Heinrich Mueller is Bob Mueller. You put the two pictures next to him and you can't believe the resemblance. Um, uh, I'm just saying. And Heinrich Mueller ends up going to South America. He did spend a lot of time in Russia, and then he's playing the piano for Harry Truman. Heinrich Mueller got around.
so when was he playing the? When was Heinrich Mueller playing the piano for Harry Truman? When did that
He was
happen?
playing the piano. Heinrich Mueller had gone. Well, first of all, the common story is Heinrich Mueller died in the bombing, the last days of the bombing of Berlin, and the conspiracy theory or whatever is no, Heinrich Mueller, that was a fake death so that he could go to Russia and help them catch up with the key technologies they needed to catch up on the bomb. And the key uh, leapfrog technology that they needed was centrifugation, because they didn't have the huge uh, gaseous diffusion plants that we had all over the country. But centrifuges were 10 times as efficient and 1/10 the power input and all this stuff. So they felt like, hey, if we really want a Cold War here, we really want to Rothschild these people. You know, Rothschilds, you got to have a balance beam. You know, you got to have a teeter-totter that's balanced. So we got to make a credible threat on the Russian side. They got to explode a bomb here, and we got to get them to a bomb quick to make this thing believable. But once that's done, and then,
Or Mark would tell you get a movie made in Laurel Canyon that shows that you have a bomb.
well, I know I've interviewed too many people that were,
There he is.
yeah, yeah, I've interviewed too many people that with Geiger counters. So, but everybody's allowed their, one egg
that
that doesn't
it
hatch.
could be a really big dirty bomb, and then the Geiger counters would still go crazy. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just saying.
spend too many
I'm
times.
just saying.
I
Just
spend
saying.
too much time talking to people who work at linear accelerators and cyclotrons. So, but anyway, that's okay. Everybody's
But
allowed
I
to
don't.
want.
I don't think that Mark. I don't think that Mark argues that linear accelerators and cyclotrons don't work. I don't think that he. I don't think that he argues that nuclear power plants don't work. I think that his only argument is that nuclear bombs
Well,
aren't real.
there's.
But
I mean,
and
with
forgive me, Mark, if I'm putting words in your mouth.
I don't think he does either, and I respect Mark tremendously. So that's why I'm kind of saying everybody's allowed to have one or two eggs that don't hatch for whatever reason, and I'm not saying why, but in order to get the release of energy to heat the water to the temperature it does, there does have to be a conversion, and I'll just leave it at that. But the bottom line here, I'm even thrown off track of what my original point was with Mark. But the idea is Mueller then came to the United States to then try to get the National Security Act of 1947 cleared, and the idea was going to be, hey, they're way out in front of where you think they are. They got this new thing. It's a secret thing they're gonna leapfrog. They're really working on an atomic bomb. I can't remember when the first atomic bomb was exploded. I think it was 5 years after Hiroshima,
You mean
somewhere in there.
hydrogen bomb?
Well, not the hydrogen bomb. The first atomic bomb for the Russians, I think, was
Oh,
52. It might have been earlier than that, but anyway, the Allen Dulles crew supposedly brought in Mueller and said, "Hey, no, they're way ahead of where you think they are. We need the National Security Act. We need to centralize intelligence. The way we have the current setup is all these different forces,
so is that the
army."
raison d'etre for leaking all of that information to the Russians? Was to get the National Security Act passed? Is that kind
No,
like
no, I think that the leaking the information, and you could do it through various people like Burgess and the Cambridge Five to leak the information, but that was to create the Rothschild balance beam, right? Without the Rothschild balance beam, you don't have people in dire fear giving all their labor and treasure to the military industrial complex. They do things like go to Disneyland with it, right? So you have to create the fear, and it has to be a credible fear, right?
right? Well, you create the credible fear in order to get the National Security Act of 1947 passed. Because at the it was the end of 45 or 46 that Truman basically just made the OSS go away. So there was a period of time between the Intelligence Act of 1947 and the dissolution of the OSS, where I guess the Pentagon was in charge of national intelligence at that point, right?
Yeah, the Macduff story tells this, but every service had their own intelligence service, and they didn't always cooperate. And that was the need to centralize the intelligence to report to the president. And the Navy the Bob Mueller wing was supposedly saying, "Hey, we know more stuff," because we had this guy, double agent named Klaus Fuchs, and Burgess and Kim Philby, and I can't remember the original other Cambridge Five guys, Don McLean, all those guys. They've given it all to the Russians, and if we keep doing this separate services intelligence thing, we're going to lose. And we have some evidence of this because FBI and Hoover does put Macduff on the case to centralize all the files in 52. So we don't
So
know.
how just stop me because I'm still the coincidence of it still kind of just blows my mind because I still remember when this guy with a hat walked up behind you with a violin, you know, and then introduced himself, and then you guys started talking, and then you said to John, it's like, you know. You started making all doing your George Webb thing where you started connecting all of the dots for John, and I could see John kind of his head spinning a little bit. And how crazy is it that John's father was in the middle of all of this stuff that you'd already been talking about. I mean, and I know that John probably had a certain feeling about it, or he wouldn't have walked up to you in the first place. But like, you were there, and he was in Maryland, and he came down and introduced himself to you and played his violin. That was at the same time that you had that other guy who was playing guitar. Was wasn't there another
Oh,
guy?
JK was interesting because, but that wasn't the first time I met Macduff. The first time I
Okay.
met Macduff, he came and met me and Jason in when I was doing the Seth Rich stuff, and Molly McCauley, there, U.S. Space Agency blowing the whistle again on space agency money being diverted, kind of like what's happening here in Paris with the European Space Agency. And this is so anyway. Seth Rich's death is introduced to take the light and limelight away from Marlon McCauley's
And,
death. But
and,
anyway,
and yeah, I mean, the whole reason I brought it up is just because the coincidence of it is it's mind boggling to me. And it makes me, my old joke about the simulation is that there's really only 700 people in the universe, and the rest are just like NPCs out there that are there to make us believe that the world is much bigger than it really is. And
well,
whenever,
Seth Rich's death is very much, I think, the driving factor uh, for John to come to Washington and introduce himself to me because he sensed that there was a whistleblower here that was being silenced, or two. The Molly McCauley thing, he had a lot of knowledge about Washington and the arcane goings on of the early days after World War II because of his dad. And his dad was chasing the Russians around, Maryland and so forth, and Washington D.C. And he had been involved in this case, the Scarbuck case in Eastern Europe. So he knew there was something. He knew there was some kind of connective tissue with the Russians always being like fake Russians always being introduced into our political system. So Seth Rich, I think, was the trigger for him to come up. But then he started telling me this we were at a Chinese restaurant or a Japanese restaurant, and Jason said, "Oh, I'm tired," and he went back to the room and went to sleep. And of course, I was like, "Oh my God, this is the whole answer to the test." So he starts telling me about Fletcher Prouty and the secret team, and then what his dad did, and what he did for Hoover, and then what he did for Saxa. He explained Saxa to me, and then we got off on Shakespeare. But it was really I said, this is a key piece here. Like you always taught me, Peter. Every movie is background, middle grounds, and then foregrounds. You sometimes need the background just as much, even though it's just wheat blowing in a field and the sounds of the wheat going back and forth and the sounds of the ocean before the Higgins boats come into Normandy Beach. It's the setting. And this was the setup for our government being taken over by a secret team. And John's dad was in the middle of it. So, wow. Why wouldn't I want to know everything I could about that?
right? No. Like I said, it's just to me, I think back on it and it's just like mind blowing because if you wrote it, like people might not even believe it, but the fact that it just happened and we all witnessed it is phenomenal.
I
You know,
did write about it. I wrote about it in Blackberry's Matter, and nobody believed it. Most people didn't believe it, said I made it up. But a lot of people there, that saw it happen live. But then,
indeed.
I think that the really interesting part about it was, like, let's say Mark Kulak, for instance, did some incredible research along with Bill Taylor about Gibson Island and Bob Mueller. And they start filling in the blanks. Hey, Jimmy Doolittle was the one who was flying around Gibson Island. And hey, Gordon Rockefeller was the guy who was doing the helicopters. And hey, the tetraethyl lead for Goering over here was this guy. And hey, Symington was the first Air Force secretary when they split off Monsanto. And, just one after another insight was coming from sort of before the Nazi think tank incubator in the United States before World War II was Gibson Island. And all the pieces started coming together really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Gibson Island, I tweeted a couple of days ago. I can go find it. Did you? There was a piece on the Duke Report about Jarvis Island. Did you hear about Jarvis Island? So Jarvis Island is kind of, I think, famous because it's like where guano comes from. And a lot of people think guano is fertilizer, but the same stuff that they make munitions out of is the same thing that they make fertilizer out of, ammonium nitrate. But apparently, Peter Daszak, one of his contracts, all of the money was being spent on Jarvis Island, and I'll have to go find the piece. It was on the Duke Report. But it was funny. I was thinking, and I tweeted something about Annie Jacobsen saying that the Nazi bioweapons people loved islands, right? Because they had this idea that they could control their biome, right, and things wouldn't get out, like Lyme disease, or I think Lyme disease came out of Plum Island or something. Anyway,
Well, there's other.
but Jarvis Island was the thing. So I'll let you talk and then I'll go find it.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your line,
You
Peter.
weren't.
I just was going to say, of course, Mark Kulak did the great research on Plum Island as well with Eric Traub, coming from Nazi weapons programs, bioweapons programs, to America, to your favorite Long Island, Long Island Sound island in mine, and of course before that, Grenard Island in Scotland, where all the anthrax experiments were done. So these islands, Incel Reams, off the coast of Germany and Denmark. Islands are a really good place, and then there's one that off the coast of Louisiana. Islands are a really good place to test bioweapons with animals
Yeah.
because it limits their migration.
Yeah. So here's the Capital Sheila. Now I got to make sure that I added her because started reading her stuff and I thought I need to add her to the Duke Report. So yeah, why did the DoD and USAID give EcoHealth Alliance funds for pandemic research on Jarvis Island in the Pacific Ocean? My latest Substack that shows that funds to study bat viruses in Western Asia were rerouted to an island 1,300 miles from Hawaii.
Well, this may seem like a very obtuse observation, but they had a project not too long ago to bring back the dodo bird, and which went extinct, if you remember. And
Right. This is out of Jurassic Park, out of what's his
yep,
name? The author who came to my eighth grade English class, Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton. Yeah.
Michael Crichton. I'm sorry. Yeah, Michael Crichton. But if you remember, the dodo bird's claim to fame was a phosphate output, a guano output that put all the other birds to shame. And one of the reasons the dodo was successful on the islands was because they completely covered everything in guano. And the bats that produce the guano, I don't know if it's on Jarvis Island or not, are just getting started as far as guano production when you want to start talking about the dodo. And the only reason that you would ever want to bring back the dodo would be explosives. It's not the prettiest bird there ever was, right? So this is how, I don't want to say this is how Nazis think. This is how the very rarefied group of Silesian Nazi bioweapons scientists think, like Peter Daszak and Peter Daszak's dad. Bring back the dodo is something that Peter Daszak would wear on a T-shirt on like a summer vacation.
Sorry, I got distracted there. My once again, Backblaze, my backup program that I use for my computer, you can't turn it off. You turn it off and it just pops up again and destroys the quality of the stream. And I don't know how I'm going to manage this going forward. But anyway, I got distracted. So Jarvis Island. So if people want to check that out, it's on my Twitter. I don't know if I've added Capital Sheila onto the Duke Report, but if I haven't, I will. and then people can follow up on that because I think that that was an exclusive. Navies. This is why navies wound up becoming kind of and I think I learned this from you. Kind of became the original kind of military intelligence services because they were moving information from one continent to another. So they were kind of like the arbiters of who got to learn, what was going on, right? And that kind of put them in a proprietary position.
Yeah, the only way that Heinrich Mueller gets inside of the White House and plays Mein Liebchen, Mein Liebchen, Mein Liebchen for Harry Truman is if he's ushered in by Navy intelligence. He's ushered in by somebody working for DuPont and the Manhattan Project, which is Bob Mueller's father, in my opinion. And
On
that,
the presidential yacht that was.
well, the Sylph, the USS Sylph, is named after the bank that is the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company's money laundering bank in Hong Kong. Just saying. I mean, I don't want
Sylph?
the first ship with first opium ship, the Hardin Matheson Bank in Hong Kong. That was their first ship. Teddy Roosevelt's presidential yacht was also called the Sylph, and it means very effervescent, wispy-like smoke. You see it one minute, it's gone the next. Connie's saying something here, so I better listen up.
She says there's Jarvis Island. There's no permanent inhabitants. The island is visited by migratory seabirds and shorebirds, as well as threatened and endangered sea turtles. A U.S. National Wildlife Refuge, and I don't know how do you route money through an island that doesn't have any people? Is there a bank? Is the, is
Oh,
the
a
bank
lot of
is
uninhabited islands have banks because that's true. It's true.
I'm laughing because I believe you, George.
Yeah. That's not unusual.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Of course they do. But I don't think it's just money laundering. I think there's an experiment going on there because this goes back to my original. Supposedly, there's some information that came out about the origins of coronavirus today that point to Peter Daszak and the gain of function experiments, and now they are admitting the lab leak and so forth on French television here.
Right, but the lab link here. I have to put up my to protect my channel. I have to put up my speculation. Here we go. But to me, the lab link is just like the. I saw a great video someplace. I can't remember where it was, where they described like intelligence and counterintelligence as like the concentric walls behind a fort. Like that the first wall is going to fail, and so then you've got the other fail. You have the other wall inside the one wall, and to me, lab link is like a wall because like if this is a deployment, right? If this is a bioweapon deployment, then your fallback position is, oh, we got caught. It was a leak. We mishandled some stuff and it accidentally escaped in order to cover for the fact that, oh, we had people with, spray bottles spraying doorknobs in Wuhan, or the air conditioning, reversing the airflow in the air conditioners in the subway system. Oops. So here, I'll take
Yeah,
off my.
the best live exercises are mistakes. Like you said, the covers
Mistakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Prather always talks about force multiplication. One person making an innocent mistake, which is associated with a force multiplier, like a huge set of air conditioning systems, is much more believable than 1,000 people accidentally spraying the same kind of spray on 1,000 different doorknobs.
Right.
It seems like it's a coordinated activity. It's 1,000 different chin chin on she girls spraying the spray, but one person reversing the air conditioners, it could happen. I'm just saying plausible deniability here.
Right. Exactly.
But what happens if you accidentally do reverse the air conditioners with 100 different sets of athletes in a town? They're all going to get on a plane in less than a week. They're all going to fly back to their original countries, and you're going to have the incredible phenomenon of 120 different countries coming down with coronavirus simultaneously. It's called the NATO Wuhan military games. Boom. That's the way you do it if you're going to do it. Isn't that
And you
exactly
and
what?
and you hit the military because then your third wall would be, oh, it was a deployment, but it was done by a foreign actor. It wasn't done by us. It was done by somebody else. It had to have been somebody who wanted to disrupt. It had to be here. I'll hit speculation. It had to be. Was North Korea in the games? I don't know that they were. It was North Korea, right? Or it was
I
Iran,
I
right?
always look at the Qatari soccer team, and I tell you, a lot of those guys, the Ukrainians were
Yeah, but
there.
they're never going to take the bullet. They're never going to take the hit. Like it's either going to be the Iranians or the North Koreans because that's
Oh,
their
right,
job. Because that's their job. The job of the North Koreans and the Iranians is to be the bad guys. They put the black hat on,
right.
and that's
Well, or the Russians, or the Chinese, or whoever, but the supposedly new information out. I think these genetic signatures are the things that are going to be the end of all this. But the bottom line, fundamental thesis, I'll just say it really quickly. It's they don't seem to be able to do it in the air. They've tried to aerosolize. That's the number one goal of doing bioagents, because your enemy is not going to come over for dinner, right? So you're going to have to spray them from a distance, spray them from a drone, spray them from a plane, send a missile, flip a trebuchet or something to get it over there. So
with
that's
a
the
cat
ultimate
with a cow.
with a cow,
Yeah.
Cher LaBoche, but if not, then your second order of business is try to get it into a product they use, like cigarettes. So I had task force saying, hey, there's this guy, who's making all this illegal cigarettes, and he's making the illegal, the, he's got 29 states of, um, of convenience stores, and they're doing it in the tobacco. I got Bob Malone making synthetic tobacco. I've got Bob Malone making synthetic inhalable vaccines. He's working for Leidos as well, for people doing x-rays of people going in and out of planes. He's sponsored by the Tobacco Institute. But the problem is that the problem is you only get people who smoke. So how are you going to get it into the water or food chain? And that's your other vector. And the lungs is no longer your target. Your new target with the ACE2 receptors is the gut. And there's ACE2 receptors in your gut, just like there's ACE2 receptors in your lungs. And if once you go that route, you can actually see in the defecation and so forth, you can see the detritus of your handiwork. You can actually use these waste management systems that are tuned to that frequency of that little nanoparticle called a virus, and then see if it worked. That's why I say the Jarvis Island is interesting, because if your bats are actually producing the spike protein that you want to infect humans, if your bats are actually a reservoir and actually doing what they're supposed to do, which is amplify your concocted thing that's going to take the world down, you're going to be able to see it in the water. You're going to be able to do water samples around that island and see if you're being successful or not. And nobody goes there. It's uninhabited, so you're not going to get
It's
found.
uninhabited. It doesn't even look like it has any trees. I mean, I don't even know how a bat would survive there. I could see
Or
how a bird would, a seagull or a tern or something
or
would.
or the guano from a bird. That's the other thing here that we might not know, is the same ticks and fleas and whatever maybe the vector infect birds as well as they do bats. And birds have, bats I think can fly as far as birds, but they don't go to remote islands.
They
They
can't
like
land in the water and rest.
yeah, they like to hang. And so I think that's where your migratory bird stuff comes from. I think if the rookery, now this is speculation, high octane speculation, but I believe where the rookery is for the birds, they'll return to that point, and it's group memory. It's not any homing device or any radar that they have in their brain, but they have certain landmarks, visual landmarks, to get from Jarvis Island through looking at other islands to wherever their mainland food source is.
Well,
But
actually, I think that you've tapped into one of those other things that I think scientists are still trying to figure out, which is like I don't think that birds use landmarks. I think that they use magnetic. They've got a magnetic compass or something going on in their heads. They
well, I wanted to know that myself.
yeah.
And there's a guy who did the study in America, and he did the three major North American flyways, and they used the coast of California, and they used the Mississippi River, and they used the East Coast as a visual prompting. Mainly, there's some other ones, but they get confused when places turn into parking lots or subdivisions for their visual markings, and so I don't think they have the radar that people might have thought they had, but I do think that if you look at the Jarvis birds, okay, 1,300 miles away from Hawaii, you're going to
South.
see south, right? You're,
It's due south. It's on the. It looks like it's directly on the equator.
you're going to see other islands, and it's going to. I believe the chain is going to lead you back to Hawaii and the U.S. Navy in Hawaii.
Well, it's interesting because she says one of the downloads, the Eco Health subgrant file, a subgrant to to Jordan's Royal Scientific Society lists the place of the grant's performance as Jarvis Island. So it was paid to Eco Health Alliance, I think, through the Defense Department and then through Jordan. So
Well, King Hussein,
it gets
and
even
then
kind of crazier.
well, King Hussein was a classic money launderer, and then of course the new guy, I can't remember Abdullah.
Abdullah
Uh,
is his son, yeah.
yeah, is also another piece of work, for the CIA, but we won't get into that.
Well, my guide when I was in Amman 10 years ago, and I highly recommend going to Wadi Rum and Petra because they're amazing places. Told me that the U.S. embassy in the Middle East, in Amman, Jordan, is the biggest State Department facility in the Middle East. It's bigger than the one in Israel.
Yeah, and then the only thing may compete with that is the new one in the Green Zone in Iraq. But my point is, there's no sense in having a study on an isolated island with birds. The only value it has is if the birds migrate, because I need to vector, right? I need to vector whatever the birds are pooping or whatever they're vectoring, the bugs or the ticks. I need to have that migrate. It's not a weapon unless it travels,
Yeah,
right?
it's not a yeah, but the inverse of that, is that Annie Jacobson said that islands are a great place to test bioweapons because the myth is that you can contain them, right, on the island.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly why I would say the Navy would be interested, because wouldn't it be great if I could raise a whole bunch of Russian hawks in a rookery in Moscow on the top of a church, okay? And then the little babies would be so smart that I could fly them to Ukraine, and then they would want to go back. I could take them in a truck to Ukraine, okay? And they would want to fly back to the rookery because they had made that flight so many times that they would want to fly back and kill Vladimir Putin. Yeah, this is high octane speculation, but I'm just saying is what there was a UP-8 was the Ukraine Project 8 did describe these migratory birds and migratory bats.
So,
And I
so
was
the
like,
idea is that you take them to Jarvis Island, you'd infect them. Would you infect them on Jarvis Island, and then
well, I would put a food source, again, if you think the gut's a target, a carrier, a targetable carrier, I would put a food source there and see if they uh, have uptake, and if they do have uptake, that means it's going to be in their gut for a number of days, and then see if they fly to a neighboring island. And if they poop there and we find coronavirus where they poop, we know we've got a vector. I mean, that I think it's just that simple. It's just like, is this thing going to work for me, or is it not? Do I have to do a bow and arrow to get the coronavirus over there with a vial? I got to get it from point A to point B, right? I don't know what that comment saying. Abdullah's.
A schoolmate in high school. And Abdullah also was in Star Trek Next Generation. He was such a giant Star Trek fan that I think he was at USC. He got them to let him be an extra on Star Trek Next Generation.
6 years ago, back when I was pointing at the slides and people said I didn't exist, or I was a DIA agent or something. I was talking about Abdullah being the way station, and when they brought Gaddafi's weapons over to be reused in Syria to say the Russians did it again, for chemical weapons, so Obama would attack Syria, that Abdullah had actually trucks running from the Jordanian army, and then the guys would just leave. They would leave the keys in the trucks, leave the trucks running, put the weapons in the back, and then the terrorists, ISIS would then get in the trucks and then drive them to where they were going to launch and deploy them. So that's how closely Abdullah. I mean, Abdullah does all the. He thinks he's a special forces guy. He does the parachute jumps with all the.
There was also a plan, and I know this because I used to be in the location-based entertainment business. They wanted to build a Star Trek world like Disneyland. I'm not making this up. In Aqaba.
Well, now that I think about some of the.
Is that weird?
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, but if you look at the sand people and some of those desolate. It looks like a few of the Star Wars might have been filmed in.
No. Star Trek.
Oh, Star Trek.
A Star Trek world in Aqaba.
Well, there's a lot of money chasing too few smart ideas.
Well, if it, darn it, hang on, pause, back up. I'm glad that I've got my monitors on because this darn backup software will not turn off. Star Trek world in Aqaba, which I always, because he liked Star Trek so much. Abdullah.
Sounds like a cover for something, but
you think like a Dolph Lundgren movie or something?
I don't want to be that guy that tells Abdullah that he can't have his dreams like any other kid, So I don't want to be that guy.
But maybe you went and you spent like millions of dollars to do development work to build a Star Trek world in Aqaba.
Well, you say that. I was here in San Lo, and all these Americans are there, and I hadn't heard any American voices here at all. And these guys are like 30 years old, and they're talking about rhomboidal and trapezoidal orbs spinning in space. I'm like, wow, the science extraterrestrial thing. No, it turns out they were gaming programmers who were doing, like Normandy, 1944.
Right.
D-Day, and they're worried about, like, when there's explosions, how the rocks break away from the other rocks and spin in space.
Yeah, because they're doing particle physics in games in order to get realism.
Yeah. It's just like these are really smart guys doing a lot of filming, and then they change the film, this layering I was saying, and so forth. So getting out of your mother's basement really does change your perspective, and maybe that they were filming new Star Trek episodes in Aqaba, and this was the way to explain how the cast and crew is there. I
Again,
don't know.
this was location. So this was a location based entertainment project. That is, they wanted to build a theme park, a Star Trek theme park in Aqaba. That
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't know a lot about Jordanian society. I think it's one of the more liberal of the different Muslim religions, but I think still there would be some resistance to that kind of a theme park there. I don't know, maybe not.
yeah,
But maybe that was, I don't know. This is high octane speculation, but it does show that it could just be a big payout to Abdullah for letting the for his trucks that he lost as they drove the chemical weapons and biological weapons to Syria.
exactly. And then
Yeah,
we're yeah, exactly. And then we're just we're gonna attribute it to his fandom. Anyway, it's late there, George.
yep,
We've been going for over an hour, so I'm thinking we should probably wrap this up.
yes. Let's do that.
So we're gonna do this again on Thursday. Is that the plan here?
Yeah, let's do it on Thursday. We'll go bi-weekly here. Peter, I was just hoping, though, before I leave, that there would be some information about T-shirts on the Duke Report. Is there
Um,
any way I could get a T-shirt?
yes, if you go to the dukeport.com/shop, then we've got a few new designs. I had one design rejected that I tweeted about a few hours ago by Spreadshirt. I'm exploring other options besides Spreadshirt, but the most obvious one seems to be Amazon. Amazon now does like custom shirts.
Wow, I
And
did not know that.
I like supporting the little guy, but if the little guy is going to be so woke that they don't want to let me do my own designs, then I don't know. Maybe I'll go check. The Amazon is kind of weird in a certain way that I had a buddy who sold DVDs, and this is 7 or 8 years ago. He was selling yoga DVDs, and there were people who were bootlegging his DVDs and then also selling them on Amazon. And he complained to Amazon, and Amazon said, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about it." And he said, "I'm the intellectual property owner." And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't stop it as long as people were selling stuff on Amazon. They didn't care. So,
That's right. Hey, if people are wish listing it, you don't have a damn chance
yeah.
at all, right?
So,
Yeah.
George, how do people support you?
Oh, I never thought you'd ask. Actually, I wasn't waiting for that, but Venmo is one way, and GeoWebb.
Yeah.
I am very lucky, Peter, to have a network of researchers. So I'm not paying anything for my lodging here in Normandy, which is really cool. And they're providing the car, which is really incredible. But I feel like I need to buy them dinner for doing that. So there is some expense. But it's like €25 for the day for each person. So it's 4 researchers. And then PayPal is George Sweigert. My full name is George Webb Swigert. So I used Swigert way back when for my PayPal. And that's how you can help support the research effort. We've done a lot of great research here at the charrette, by the way. A lot of Nazi type research for that we'll be sharing as we go on.
Well, maybe we could talk about that next on Thursday.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And then one last thing, Peter,
Mm-hmm.
is it thedukereport.com? Is that how you say that
It is
URL?
it is thedukereport.com, and as soon as I get off this stream, I'm going to turn to Carrie and we're going to go figure out about whether or not we're going to buy dukereport.com because the guy who owns it has offered it to us. So we're still
Whoa.
bouncing it
That'd
back
be
and forth. That would
okay.
make it simpler for a lot of people because, I tell people about the Duke Report. I tell them the Duke Report, the Duke Report, the Duke Report, and then they come back and they go, "It's a basketball site." And I go, "No, it's the Duke Report." So anyway,
There you
um,
go. Well, thank you. Until Thursday then.
till Thursday. And I think that when on the way out, I'm gonna play this 4 minute and 30-second video on the structure of F for Fake from Every Frame of Painting, another YouTube channel, and we can say goodnight to everybody.
Great, thank you, Peter.
All right, so let me share this. And I will start this.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this is Every Frame of Painting. So this channel's been going well, which means it's about time.
Time for a confession?
Yeah, time for a confession. I've stolen more ideas from this film than from any other.
F for fake.
F for fake.
F for fake.
Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction, this is a film about trickery and fraud, about lies.
Wait, sorry, I'm doing this wrong. Can we start over? This is an essay film by Orson Welles. It's called F for Fake, and it's one of my personal Bibles. Everything I know about editing, I learned from this film. But today, I want to talk about one basic thing: structure.
We've found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it.
When you're structuring a video essay, there's one thing you really want to avoid.
Gosh, I think that's about it.
And then?
No, that's it.
And then?
Then nothing else, because I'm done ordering, okay?
And then?
If you tell a story that's and then they and then and that, you're in big trouble.
This is the number one mistake I make in my own work. Like here, watch how repetitive this is. Choosing to take the money, choosing not to fight back, choosing to hide their emotions, choosing not to trust someone, choosing to wait out the discomfort, choosing to get... This is a list you could put in any order. That's why it's so boring.
What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but, right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens.
What are those? My pubes. What? I got them from Scott Tenorman.
And therefore, this happens.
Hartman, you don't buy pubes, you grow them yourself. You're telling me these pubes are worth nothing. Yeah.
But this happens,
And I'll give you the pubes.
Sweet.
therefore, this happens.
Ah, god damn it!
So throughout this movie, Orson Welles does the exact same thing, except he doesn't connect scenes, he connects thoughts.
You're a painter. Why do you want people to do fakes?
Because the fakes are as good as the real ones, and there's a market and there's a demand.
If you didn't have an art market, then fakers could not exist.
Even though this movie is an essay, each moment has the connective logic of a South Park episode. The second rule in this movie is to have more than one story moving in parallel.
I'll quote Hitchcock again. He said the name of making movies is Meanwhile Back at the Ranch. He's absolutely right. You want to have two things going. You reach the peak of one, you go to the other.
I hope you know what you're doing.
You pick the other up just where you want it. When it loses interest, drop it. Meanwhile, back to the ranch.
How does this work in an essay film? Well, let's say you have two stories. Let one of them build up. When it reaches peak interest, switch to the other. Let this one build. And when this gets to the top, go back to the first. Simple, right? Except F for Fake doesn't just have two things. There's also stories about Orson Welles, Howard Hughes, a woman named Oya, and even the making of this movie. And by building each story carefully, Welles can jump between all 6 of these without ever losing the audience.
But not Robert
So when I'm
Mayhew.
making a video essay, this is what's going through my head.
No ending! No ending! No ending!
And I got all of that from watching this film, which more than anything has taught me, it's not about what you get, it's how you cut it, and what comes out the other end. Remember, video essays aren't essays. They're films. So you want to structure and pace them like a filmmaker would. Therefore and but, meanwhile, back at the ranch. And if you don't believe me, at least trust Orson Welles, who somehow figured this out over 40 years ago.
Why not? I'm a charlatan.
But whatever, let's wrap up this essay.
Now it's time for an introduction.
Hi, my name is Tony, and this concludes year 1 of Every Frame of Painting. I'd like to thank you for watching.
And wish you all a very pleasant good evening.
And Peter, I have just one thing to say.
Yes.
Romeo is in love with Julia, and it almost all works out, but Mercutio gets stabbed or stabs Tybalt. So Tybalt stabs Mercutio, so Romeo stabs Tybalt, and now he's wanted for murder. Right? It's like, but
But
there you go.
there you
Bye,
go.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.